It was always difficult to start a new investigation, especially when it involved a serial killer. My name is Jackson, and I am a private investigator. When I got the first call about the new case, my heart sank with anticipation. It was already evening when I drove up to the place of disappearance. A young woman named Emily disappeared and was last seen on one of the forgotten streets of the city. The light from the lanterns flickered, creating shadows that moved as if the shadows themselves had a will of their own. I walked around the corner and came upon her car. She stood abandoned with the door open. I leaned in, surveying the place. On the seat was her bag, in which I found her cell phone. On the screen was the last dialed number. It was a call to the emergency service, but the call was cut off. Something went wrong, very wrong. My intuition told me that it wasn't just a disappearance. She would have felt in danger and therefore called 911. I started asking the locals if they had seen anything suspicious. One of the men, named Bill, recalled seeing someone in a hood standing near her car. This was the beginning, just the first piece of the puzzle I needed to put together. All roads led to a dark basement where all hope disappeared. I went back to my office to check all the records. Emily was the fourth woman to disappear in the past 2 months. What they had in common were not only their youth and beauty, but also the manner in which they disappeared, in broad daylight, without any sign of a struggle. I sat at the table looking at the photos and trying to find some connecting line between them. The phone on my desk rang again and I picked it up. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar but so calm that it sent chills down my spine. "Are you looking for Emily?" asked the voice. "Yes. Who is it?" I answered, trying to keep myself in my hands. "If you want to find her alive, you better hurry," the voice replied. And then the call ended. I rushed to the car, not sure if it was a real tip or just a prank, but I couldn't risk it. I had a feeling that we were dealing with someone very dangerous. My journey was just beginning, and the fear was already taking its toll. The place the stranger directed me to was on the outskirts of the city, an old, abandoned house that has long been forgotten. The windows were boarded up, the door hung on only one hinge. I got out of the car and quietly approached the house. My heart was pounding in my chest like crazy. I opened the door and saw a dark corridor stretching deep into the building. Thoughts about all the horrors that could be hiding here flashed in my head. The light of my lantern pulled pieces of old wallpaper and dust-covered furniture out of the darkness. But I was most interested in the basement. I found the hatch and slowly climbed down. The smell of dampness and mold filled his nose. There were footprints on the floor. Bloody traces. My heart stopped for a moment when I saw her, Emily, tied to the wall but alive. Her eyes were full of fear, but she recognized me. I quickly approached and began to untie her. "Hes here somewhere nearby?" she whispered, and we heard footsteps behind us. My investigation turned into a struggle for survival, and that was just the beginning. My hands were shaking as I untied the ropes around Emily's wrists. Her look, filled with terror, spoke louder than any words. We both knew that time was short. The footsteps behind us grew louder, echoing in the dark basement like the echoes of the worst nightmare. "Who is this?" I whispered. But Emily just shook her head, her lips pursed, not making a sound. I felt a chill run down my spine as a faint shadow appeared at the end of the corridor. The shadow was approaching, and the heart was beating like crazy. I grabbed Emily's hand and we ran. The corridor seemed endless, and every step sounded like a shot in the stillness of the night. When we finally got out of the basement, I closed the door and tried to find something to block it. My head was filled with thoughts of escape, but every sound, every movement seemed to betray our plans to the enemy. We ran outside, and the cold night air hit our faces. All my instincts screamed that we were not safe. I looked around to make sure we weren't being followed, but I didn't see anything suspicious. "Jackson, we have to keep running," Emily whispered, her voice shaking with fear. We ran to my car, which was parked nearby, but when I tried to start it, the engine wouldn't start. The breakdown of the car at such a moment was like the last stroke of fate. I desperately tried again and again, but nothing happened. At that moment, I realized that we would have to seek shelter on foot. We ran through the narrow streets, hiding in the shadows. Every step, every sound seemed louder than before. Our shadows blended into the darkness of the night, but we knew the maniac could be anywhere. We found shelter in an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town. It was dark and cold inside, but it was the only place we could rest and think about what to do next. Emily sat down on the floor and began to cry softly. I sat next to her and hugged her, trying to calm her down. "He won't stop until he finds us," she said through tears. Her words penetrated my heart, causing a wave of panic. I understood that she was right. This maniac was not just a killer, he was a hunter, and we were his prey. I knew we needed to find help, but who could we turn to? The police were already looking for Emily, but could they find us before he did? I had only one solution. We had to disappear until he finds us again. My heart was beating fast as I began formulating a plan. We had to leave the city, leave all traces behind. I shared my thoughts with Emily and she nodded in agreement. "I have a friend in the next town, he can help us," I said. We decided to move at night, when there is less chance of being seen. We knew it was risky, but we had no choice. When we left the warehouse, the night was even darker, and every sound sounded like a threat. We moved quietly and quickly, keeping together. My hand didn't let go of Emily's, and I could feel her shaking. Our path lay through dark streets and empty houses. We carefully avoided all possible dangers, but fear was always there. My thoughts were focused on one thing: survival. Suddenly, we heard the sound of footsteps behind us. I looked back and saw the same shadow that was chasing us. It was him, Maniac. His presence was like an invisible threat hanging over us. We ran faster, but he was close. I felt that every step, every breath could be my last. My hand gripped Emily's hand even tighter, and we ran towards the nearest lighted place. When we finally reached a lighted street, we saw a small cafe that was still open. We ran inside, breathing heavily. Several visitors looked at us in surprise, but I quickly explained that we were looking for help. The owner of the cafe, an old man named Tom, understood our situation. He suggested that we stay the night and hide. Emily and I agreed. Tom locked the doors and closed the windows, creating a safe space for us. But we knew it was only a temporary shelter. I couldn't sleep at night. My thoughts revolved around what we had experienced. The maniac was out there somewhere, and he wouldn't stop until he found us. I looked back at Emily, who had finally fallen asleep, and felt a wave of guilt. I should have protected her better. My thoughts flashed back to when I first learned of Emily's disappearance. I couldn't afford to lose her. I decided that I would do whatever it took to protect her, even if it meant risking my own life. In the morning, we woke up to Tom's voice saying that he had called his friend the police. We had a chance to escape, but it was risky. The maniac was close, and we knew it. Our trial was just beginning, and we had to be ready for anything. When we left the cafe, I felt every muscle in my body tense. We knew that every minute counted. Tom gave us the keys to his old car so we could get away faster. I thanked him and promised that we would return his car. We got into the car and set off in the direction of a nearby town. The road led us through dark forests and empty highways. Emily was sitting next to me, and I could see her hands shaking. She was looking out the window, but I knew her thoughts were somewhere far away. "Jackson, do you think we're going to get away?" she asked in a low voice, barely holding back tears. "I promise we can. We have to find a safe place," I replied, trying to reassure her even though I felt insecure myself. Suddenly, I noticed the headlights of a car following us in the distance. My heart started beating faster. My hands tightened on the steering wheel and I accelerated. The car behind us also picked up speed. "It's him, I'm sure," Emily whispered, looking in the rearview mirror. Her words pierced me like a blade. I knew we couldn't keep running forever. We had to find a way to stop him, or at least break away. I turned onto the narrow, winding road, hoping he would lose sight of us. We raced through the darkness, and every turn seemed like a trap. I could feel a cold sweat running down my back. My heart was beating like crazy, and my thoughts were spinning, trying to find a way out of this deadly game. Suddenly, the car behind us disappeared. I turned around and saw that he had stopped at the crossroads. My hope was restored a little, but I knew we couldn't relax. We continued forward, hoping to find a safe place. When we finally reached a nearby town, I stopped the car on the outskirts. We ran outside, trying to find a phone booth to call for help. But suddenly we heard the sound of footsteps. Someone was coming to us. I looked around and saw a figure in the shadows. It was him, Maniac. He found us. His eyes glittered in the darkness and his smile was full of terror. Emily hid behind me and I felt her shivering transfer to me. "You will not be able to escape. he said in a cold, soulless voice. My heart stopped for a moment. I knew we had to fight or die. I decided I wouldn't let him hurt Emily. I threw myself at him, trying to stop this nightmare. We fought in the dark, and every blow, every movement was filled with desperation. I could feel my strength leaving me, but I couldn't stop myself. My life and Emily's depended on it. As I felt his hands tighten around my throat, I began to pass out. But at that moment, I heard Emily scream. She found a rock and hit the maniac on the head. He fell to the ground, and I was finally able to breathe. We wasted no time and ran on without looking back. My heart was beating like crazy, but I knew we had only one chance to save ourselves. We got to the house of my friend, Detective Mike. He was the only person I trusted in this town. When we knocked on the door, he opened it and saw our exhausted faces. Without asking any questions, he let us in and locked the door. "What happened?" Mike asked, looking at us with concern. "A maniac is chasing us," I answered, trying to breathe evenly. Mike understood the seriousness of the situation and immediately called his colleagues. We knew this nightmare wasn't over yet, but at least now we had a chance to escape. When the police arrived, we told them everything that happened. The police began an investigation and patrolling the area. We stayed at Mike's trying to recover, but fear never left us. Every sound, every movement seemed like a threat. I couldn't sleep, knowing that a maniac was out there looking for us. Emily was trying to be strong, but I could see her psyche slowly breaking down. She lost faith in security, and that was the worst thing. I knew we had to find a way to stop him for good, but how? Mike and his team worked tirelessly, gathering evidence and looking for any clues that might lead to the maniac. They set up patrols around the house trying to keep us safe, but we knew that he was cunning and dangerous. I decided to help with the investigation. I managed to find several old cases that could be related to our maniac. All the victims were similar, young women missing. But there was something else. They all had one thing in common. They were all of a certain age and lived in the same area. Mike and I began to investigate the area and discovered something interesting. All of the disappearances happened near an old school that had been abandoned many years ago. I decided we should explore this place. We took some officers and went to the school. This place was dark and creepy. Every step echoed in the void, and we could feel the fear creeping up on us. When we got to the basement, we found old records and photos. They talked about a man who worked here many years ago. He was a teacher, but something happened and he was fired. This man was like our maniac. We found his name, Henry Lambert. He disappeared after his release and no one knew where he was. But now we knew he was back. His goal was revenge. We took all the evidence and returned to the police headquarters. Now we had a plan. We knew that Henry Lambert was looking for us, and we decided to use that to our advantage. We set a trap trying to get his attention. We decided to leave a message for Henry so he would think Emily and I were old school. The police set up an ambush and we waited. Every minute was full of tension. My heart was beating fast and I could feel my adrenaline pumping. Finally, we heard footsteps. Someone was approaching the school. I saw Henry. His face was distorted with anger and rage. He entered the building unaware that it was a trap. The police arrested him, and I felt a sense of relief that was mixed with fear. Henry Lambert was arrested and charged with all the crimes. Emily and I could finally feel safe, but this experience left an indelible mark on our souls. We knew life would never be the same. We left the city trying to start a new life, but I knew those horrible memories would always be with us. The maniac no longer haunted us, but his shadow remained forever in our hearts. Our new life began in a small town in the West where no one knew our story. We tried to return to normality, but every sound, every unfamiliar sight caused anxiety. Emily went back to work, but I could see her nerves were on edge. At night, she often woke up from nightmares, and I hugged her, trying to calm her down. One evening, when I was coming home, I noticed that the door was ajar. My heart froze. I slowly walked inside, trying not to make a sound. All our things were in place, but something was wrong. I felt a chill of fear creep up my spine. I walked around the house, and when I got to the bedroom, I saw a note on the bed. "I know where you are." My heart was beating like crazy. Whoever it was, he knew about us. My hands were shaking as I dialed Mike's number and told him about it. Mike came right away. He inspected the house and ordered us not to leave it until the circumstances were clarified. Emily was panicking, and I tried to calm her down, But my own fear did not allow me to be strong. I knew our nightmare was back. "Jackson, what are we going to do?" she asked, hiding in my arms. "We have to stick together and not lose our heads. Mike will help us," I replied, trying not to show my desperation. Mike left several officers guarding our house, but I didn't feel safe. At night, I sat by the window, watching every movement on the street. My thoughts were full of fear and suspicion. Suddenly, I saw a shadow moving down the street. It was something unreal, like in a nightmare. I felt a cold sweat covering my forehead. I went outside and saw a figure disappearing around the corner. I ran after her without thinking about the consequences. The figure led me to an old, abandoned house on the edge of town. I felt adrenaline fill my body. It could be a trap, but I couldn't stop myself. I entered the house where the smell of rot and dust filled my lungs. It was dark and eerie inside. I moved slowly, trying not to make a sound. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. Looking back, I saw a silhouette in the shadows. My heart was beating so fast it felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. The figure approached and I saw the face of Henry Lambert. He was smiling, his eyes glowing with hatred. He was alive. How could this happen? I felt fear grip me, paralyzing all movement. "You thought you got rid of me, Jackson?" he said. His voice was quiet, but every word pierced me like a knife. I couldn't believe my eyes. Everything we went through was in vain. He came back to finish what he started. I knew I had to fight even if the odds were against me. Henry lunged at me and we fell to the floor. His hands tightened around my throat and I felt the air disappear from my lungs. I tried to free myself, but his strength was overwhelming. At the last moment, I grabbed a piece of broken glass and hit him. He yelped and fell, letting me catch my breath. I stood up gasping for air and saw Henry trying to get up. I knew I only had one chance. I ran up to Henry and hit him again. He fell to the ground and I saw his eyes close. My heart was beating wildly, but I felt like I had finally won. I couldn't let him come back again. I left the house, barely able to stay on my feet. Emily was waiting for me on the street, who ran after me when she saw me disappear. She hugged me and we stood there in the stillness of the night, knowing that this horror was finally over. We got home and told Mike what had happened. The police arrived to collect Henry's body and confirmed that he could do no more harm. We knew our lives would never be the same, but we were grateful for the chance to start over. Emily and I left the city and went to a new place where we could find peace. But this experience will always remain with us. We knew that fear could return at any moment, but now we were ready to fight it together. Each new day was a test for us. We tried to live a normal life, but the shadows of the past were always there. Emily went to therapy to deal with her trauma, and I supported her through it all. We knew we had to fight for our future. One day, while we were walking in the park, Emily suddenly stopped. Her face turned pale, and I saw her eyes fill with fear. I looked around and saw a man staring at us from behind the trees. He looked just like Henry, and my heart sank. "It's him, Jackson. He's back," she whispered, grabbing my hand. We ran home without stopping. My heart was beating wildly, and I could feel the fear coming back with renewed force. When we finally got to our house, I locked the door and closed all the windows. We sat in the dark trying to figure out what to do next. "We can't live like this," I said, looking at Emily. "We have to find a way to stop this once and for all." We contacted Mike again and told him about our new threat. He came to us and started an investigation. We knew that Henry was dead, but who is this man that is chasing us? Mike promised to find the answer and protect us. The investigation lasted several weeks. We learned that this man was Henry's brother. He was looking for revenge for the death of his brother and was ready to do anything to destroy our lives. Mike discovered that he had been following us all this time. We knew we had to stop him before he found us again. Mike came up with a plan to trap him. We went to the old place where Henry was trapped, hoping that his brother would show up. When we reached the place, we saw him. He stood in the shadows, his eyes burning with hatred. We knew it was the last fight. I could feel fear mixed with determination. We should have won. The struggle was cruel and merciless. We fought for our lives knowing what was at stake. I could feel the pain of each blow, but I couldn't stop. We had to stop him once and for all. Finally, we were able to win. His brother fell to the ground and we felt the fear begin to fade. The police arrived and arrested him. We knew that this horror was finally over. Emily and I hugged, feeling relieved and at peace. Our life began to return to normality. We found a new home and started building a new future. The fears and shadows of the past will always remain with us, but we knew that now we could fight them together. Each new day was a gift, and we cherished every moment of our new life. Life was gradually returning to normal, but the scars left by the past were too deep. Emily and I tried to feel calm again, but every new sound or shadow made us tremble with fear. We realized that our souls are still in the grip of terror. One evening, when we were resting at home, we suddenly heard someone knocking on the door. My heart stopped and we exchanged worried looks. I took the flashlight and slowly walked to the door. When I opened them, there was no one at the door, only a note attached to the doorknob. "This is not the end." Emily started to cry and I felt the fear come over us again. We decided not to leave the house and called Mike. He arrived quickly and surveyed the surrounding area, but did not find anyone. The note made us feel helpless again. Mike stayed with us for the night, but even his presence could not calm our agitated nerves. We sat in the living room looking at the doors and windows, waiting for another attack. In every rustle, in every gust of wind, we heard a threat. The night was long and restless. Emily started having nightmares again, waking up screaming. I tried to reassure her, but I could feel my own fear rising. We knew that something dark and sinister still lurked in the shadows of our lives. The next day, we decided to call in a private investigator to help us figure out who was behind these new threats. We knew that Henry and his brother could no longer pursue us, but then who does? A detective named Carl Beckett began his investigation. He found that Henry had followers who respected his ideas and could continue his cause. We realized that our struggle is not over yet. Carl informed us that one of Henry's followers had recently been released from prison and that he might be the one behind these new threats. We felt Carl decided to act quickly. We set up cameras all over the house, trying to catch the stalker red-handed. The nights grew longer. Every sound made us shudder. Every shadow was a potential threat. One night we saw him on the cameras, a shadow that moved near our house. Carl decided to take a risk and go outside to try to catch him. Emily and I stayed inside, our hearts pounding with fear and anticipation. Carl returned a short time later with the suspect. It was a man we hadn't seen before, but his eyes glowed with hatred. He was one of those who respected Henry and wanted to avenge his leader. We felt fear mixed with rage. Carl interrogated him, and we learned that he did not act alone. There were still others ready to continue the persecution. We realized that we must act quickly and decisively to end this horrible game once and for all. Emily and I agreed to help Carl find all of Henry's followers. We went to another city where, according to the suspect, others were hiding. Our hearts were beating fast, and we could feel fear mixed with determination. We found a shelter where Henry's followers were gathering. Carl devised a plan to take over, but I knew it would be dangerous. We risked our lives to finally stop this horror. At night, we went on an assault. All sounds, all movements seemed to be reinforced by fear. We fought for our lives, for our future. Each of us knew that this battle would be decisive. My hand was shaking as I gripped the weapon, ready for anything. We were able to win. The followers were arrested, and we finally felt the shadow of fear begin to recede, but the price was high. We lost Carl in that battle, and his sacrifice left an indelible mark on our hearts. We returned home with mixed emotions. We won the battle, but our souls were devastated. Emily and I knew we had to live on, but this horror would stay with us forever. We embraced, knowing that together we could overcome any fear. Each new day was a test for us. We tried to find peace in our new lives, but the scars of the past were still with us. We knew there were many challenges ahead, but now we were ready for them. We started working with a support group, helping others who had experienced similar horrors. It gave us meaning and strength to live on. We found new friends and allies, and together we fought the shadows of our past. Despite all the difficulties, our love became stronger. Emily and I supported each other, helping to overcome the fears and shadows of the past. We knew that together we could overcome any obstacle. One night, when we had already begun to forget the horrors of the past, we heard a knock on the door again. My heart stopped and I felt the fear return with renewed force. I slowly walked to the door and opened it. Standing in the doorway was a woman I had never seen before. The woman was frightened and exhausted. She said she was being chased by the same people who once chased us. We knew we had to help her. The woman's name was Sarah. Her face was pale, her eyes full of terror. She revealed that Henry Lambert's followers were now persecuting her because she knew too much. She begged us to help her, and we couldn't refuse. But I felt that this was only the beginning of a new nightmare. Sarah stayed with us, and we did everything we could to keep her safe. But with each new day, the feeling of anxiety grew. We knew that these people would stop at nothing. They could be anywhere, and their presence was like a cold shadow that covered us again. One night, while we were sleeping, I heard strange noises from outside. My heart was beating so loudly that I could barely hear my own thoughts. I got up and walked slowly to the window. In the yard, I saw several figures hiding in the shadows. They were approaching the house. I woke up Emily and Sarah, and we quickly closed all the doors and windows. We heard someone trying to open the back door. Fear paralyzed us. We knew they were Henry's followers, and they came after us. We were surrounded. Despair gripped us. We hid in one of the rooms, listening to the door breaking under the pressure. My hand was shaking as I gripped the gun I kept for self-defense. We knew this would be our last battle. They burst into the house, and we heard their footsteps approaching. Every sound made our hearts skip a beat. When they finally entered the room, we began to fight for our lives. Emily and Sarah hid behind the furniture while I tried to hold off the attackers. The struggle was fierce. Blood was spilled. Screams echoed off the walls. I could feel my strength leaving me, but I couldn't stop. I could see Emily and Sarah struggling with despair and fear on their faces. It was a real nightmare from which there was no way out. Finally, after a long and exhausting struggle, we were able to break free. A few followers were left lying on the floor, but we knew it was not the end. We had to find a way to stop them forever. We contacted Mike again, and he came to help. He started a new investigation, trying to find everyone who was involved in this conspiracy. We knew we had to act fast while there was still a chance to stop them. One day we received an anonymous message. It contained information about a secret meeting of Henry's followers, which was to take place in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. We decided to take this chance and gather evidence to put an end to this threat. We prepared for a warehouse raid. Mike gathered the team, and we headed out there under the cover of night. My heart was pounding as we approached the meeting point. We knew it could be a trap, but we had no choice. The warehouse was neglected and gloomy. We moved quietly, trying not to attract attention. As we approached the central part, we saw a group of people gathered around their leader. It was a new leader of followers who continued Henry's cause. We decided to act immediately. Mike gave the signal, and we began the operation. Chaos erupted. We fought the followers trying to capture their leader. Every blow, every shot was filled with fear and determination. Finally, I found myself face to face with the leader. His eyes were cold and merciless. He smiled as if he knew something we didn't. I felt fear mingle with anger. This was our last chance to put an end to this terrible story. The battle was brutal and merciless. We fought for life and death, each blow filled with rage and despair. I could feel my strength leaving me, but I couldn't stop. It was our last chance for peace. Finally, we were able to win. The leader fell to the ground, and we felt the shadow of fear begin to recede. We knew it wasn't the end, but we had taken the first step to freeing ourselves from this nightmare. We returned home with mixed emotions. We had won the battle, but our souls were still devastated. We knew there were many challenges ahead, but now we were ready for them. Our life began to return to normality. We found peace in our home again, but the scars of the past were still with us. We knew that this horror had changed us forever, but now we were stronger and ready to face any challenge. We remembered Carl and everyone who helped us in this fight. Their sacrifices were not in vain. We decided to create a fund to support victims of violence and persecution, to help others find a way to a new life. Through the foundation, we found new friends and allies who understood our suffering and were ready to help. We worked together to end the violence and ensure safety for all. Our foundation grew, and we saw how our work changed the lives of others. We knew that together we could overcome any difficulties. Each new day was a challenge, but we knew we were not alone. Despite our efforts, the shadows of the past still haunted us. Every new sound or unfamiliar sight caused alarm. We knew we had to stay alert and ready for any challenge.